What if the strongest army in Europe, led by a man convinced history bent to his will, lost not in one dramatic duel, but by 1,000 bad bets that kept compounding? From skies over Britain to the snows before Moscow, from the beaches of Normandy to the ruins of Berlin, this is the story of how Hitler's empire unraveled, choice by choice. Britain alone. When the bully met resistance picture. Europe in July 1940 like a map washed in the same color. Austria, annexed. Poland, crushed. Denmark and Norway, overrun. Belgium, the Netherlands, and France, fallen. In the south, Mussolini's Italy posed and postured as Hitler's partner. On paper, only 3 major powers were left standing in Europe: Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, tied to Berlin by a fragile peace, and Britain. Many assumed Britain would come to terms. Winston Churchill decided otherwise. Cue the voice that still raises the hairs on your neck. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall never surrender.
The landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender!
Those weren't just words. They were a promise. No deal with Hitler. Hitler's plan to break Britain was called Operation Sea Lion, an invasion that first required smashing the Royal Air Force and taking control of the skies. On July 10, 1940, the Luftwaffe began a massive air campaign, hammering airfields, radar stations, and factories. Germany had the numbers. Britain had home turf, radar, and an iron will. Then came the escalation: night raids, devastating city bombings, and a critical misstep. German aircraft accidentally bombed London. Britain hit back at Berlin. Pride pricked. Hitler shifted to bombing cities. The Blitz, believing terror would break Britain. It didn't. On September 15, 1940, the Luftwaffe launched an all-out assault. The RAF met them head-on and won. The day is remembered as Battle of Britain Day. Hitler postponed the invasion. Britain had refused to fold, and that mattered far beyond British shores. It proved Nazi Germany could be stopped. The fatal gamble. East, Operation Barbarossa. While bombs still fell over Britain, Hitler's eyes were already drifting east. He loathed communism and coveted the Soviet Union's land and resources. Despite a non-aggression pact, he was convinced a fast, brutal strike could topple the colossus with feet of clay. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa began. 3 massive German army groups surged toward Leningrad, Moscow, and Ukraine, the south. Early on, the Wehrmacht's speed and shock looked unstoppable. Soviet forces reeled. Vast encirclements swallowed entire armies. But the deeper the Germans drove, the longer their supply lines stretched, the more the terrain, weather, and Soviet resilience bit back. Autumn rains turned roads to sludge. Command indecision delayed the push on Moscow until the cold arrived. Winter, brutal, unrelenting, favored the defenders who knew it best. Meanwhile, Stalin redeployed fresh divisions from the Far East after securing a separate understanding with Japan, reinforcing Moscow just as the Germans slowed. The Blitzkrieg spark sputtered in the snow. Barbarossa had not delivered its promised knockout, and that failure would haunt Germany to the end. The war goes global. Pearl Harbor, Midway, and North Africa. If the Eastern Front became Hitler's bleeding wound, events far away would determine how quickly his opponents could tighten the noose. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Overnight, the United States shifted from reluctant observer to committed belligerent. Within hours, Congress declared war on Japan. Soon after, Germany declared war on the U.S. The World War became truly global, and industrial America's engines roared to life. 6 months later, in the Pacific at Midway, June 1942, the U.S. Navy dealt Japan a stunning blow, sinking 4 frontline carriers. Midway didn't end the Pacific War, but it flipped momentum, ensuring the U.S. could commit ever more to Europe without losing the Pacific. Meanwhile, in North Africa, British forces, reinforced by Allied troops and growing American support, fought Rommel's Africa Corps. The tide turned decisively at the Second Battle of El Alamein, October-November 1942. Churchill summed it up. It may almost be said this was not the end. It was not even the beginning of the end. But it was, perhaps, the end of the beginning. Axis forces would be driven from Africa by May 1943, reopening the Mediterranean and setting the stage for an invasion of Italy. Stalingrad, where the myth of invincibility died. As 1942 wore on, Hitler shifted focus from Moscow to the southern Soviet Union. Oil, grain, the Volga lifeline. The name Stalingrad became both an obsession and a trap. From summer into the frozen winter of 1942-43, street-by-street fighting chewed up entire divisions. The Soviets clung to riverbank scraps of the city while building strength outside it. Then, in November 1942, they snapped the trap shut, encircling the German Sixth Army. Hitler forbade a breakout, promising supplies by air. It was fantasy. By February 1943, starved and shattered, the Sixth Army surrendered. With it went the aura of German invincibility. Stalingrad was more than a battle. It was a psychological rupture. For the Wehrmacht, the road ahead led not to glory, but to grinding retreat against an enemy that had learned, adapted, and now had the wind of inevitability at its back. Cracks in the Axis. Italy falls, alliances harden. While the Eastern Front devoured armies, Mussolini's Italy faltered. The North African defeat exposed Italy's weakness. Allied forces invaded Sicily in July 1943. Italian confidence imploded. Mussolini was deposed that same month. A new government sought peace with the Allies. Germany rushed in, occupying much of Italy and propping up a puppet regime. But the Mediterranean strategy had collapsed. The Axis looked less like a steel chain and more like links straining to hold. At the grand strategy level, Allied leaders coordinated relentlessly. In Tehran, Novdek, 1943, Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill planned a cross-channel invasion to open a Western front while the Red Army pressed from the east. The Allies had learned to synchronize industry, logistics, intelligence, and operations. Hitler increasingly micromanaged, distrusted his generals, and chased symbolic objectives over strategic necessities. D-Day and the Vice Titans. At dawn on June 6, 1944, the Channel boiled with ships. D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history, put over 150,000 Allied troops onto the beaches of Normandy. The Germans fought hard, but Allied deception had misled them about the landing site, and Hitler's slow release of reserves compounded delays. Once Normandy broke open, Allied armor poured into France, liberated Paris in August, and raced toward Germany. Hitler now faced disaster on 2 fronts. In the east, the Soviets launched massive offensives. Operation Bagration in summer 1944 obliterated Germany's Army Group Center and rolled the front hundreds of kilometers west. In the Balkans and across Eastern Europe, countries fell out of the Axis orbit one by one. In the west, Allied supply lines shortened, German ones snapped. Desperate, Hitler gambled again in December 1944 with the Battle of the Bulge. A surprise offensive through the Ardennes meant to split the Allies and grab Antwerp. Initial shock created the Bulge, but American, British, and Allied resistance, stubborn stands at places like Bastogne, stalled the attack. Once the skies cleared, Allied air power shredded German logistics and armor. The offensive squandered Germany's last strategic reserves. There would be no second miracle. The endgame. Camps revealed, Berlin falls, Germany surrenders. By early 1945, the Allies had crossed the Rhine. The Red Army stormed across the Oder. At Yalta, Feb 1945, the Big Three coordinated the war's closing moves and post-war outlines. The human cost surged, tens of thousands dying each day in the war's bitter final months. As Allied armies advanced, they uncovered the truth of Nazi rule. Concentration and killing centers, mass graves, survivors clinging to life. Soldiers who had fought across continents stood stunned in places like Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen, evidence of industrialized murder strewn everywhere. The revelations hardened Allied resolve and clarified what victory must mean. In April 1945, the Soviet assault on Berlin began. The city buckled under artillery and street fighting. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler killed himself in his bunker. Within days, his lieutenants tried to sue for peace. Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 7-8, 1945, what the world marks as VE Day. Aftermath and the world remade borders shifted dramatically. Germany was partitioned. Poland was reconstituted further west. Millions were displaced. To prevent another catastrophe, the Allies tried building structures stronger than vengeance. So, why did Hitler lose? Let's pull the threads together simply and clearly. 1. Strategic overreach. He picked too many fights, Britain, the Soviets, then America. Germany could never outmatch that coalition. Underestimating opponents. He thought Britain would fold, the Soviets would crumble, and America wouldn't wake up. He was wrong, dead wrong. 3. Logistics and distance. Blitzkrieg was lightning, but in Russia's vast winter, lightning burned out. Supplies froze, armies starved. 4. Catastrophic decisions. Hitler gambled on glory, Stalingrad the Ardennes, and lost everything. His pride cost millions. 5. Allied adaptation. Narration. The Allies learned, adapted, and struck together. Africa, Italy, Normandy, the East. Germany was crushed from all sides. 6. Moral and political collapse. Narration. When the camps were revealed, the world turned against Hitler. Germany stood utterly alone. Hit subscribe and the bell icon, because the past has secrets you don't want to miss.